All right. So we're going to do some yoga. This is my little my little polar bear. This is part of the challenge for me in moving. Is it's not just the wonderful home to me and Pear and sometimes Stefan, but it's my studio for my painting. It's my studio for my teaching. So we definitely need to find a dream space. All right. We're concentrating on the spleen and stomach today. And we're going to start in butterfly. So let's bring our feet together, about 2 hands away from your groin-ish. If you're very flexible and open with your hips, feel free to bring your heels a little closer. And then grab onto your shins, lift up your heart, stretch up, take a big inhale. And with your exhale, just roll forward and soften into this forward bend, letting your head drop towards your feet. Take a couple breaths to really kind of adjust and fix and make this pose yours. Thank you. Infinite stars, infinite space, source of the knowledge of the worlds, giver of thoughts that empower creation, transforming light into the elements of matter, radiate before my mind the 7 keys that unlock the doors of the mystery temple, that I may enter and fulfill the purpose for which my birth initiates. Notice if you can allow your body to become soft. Your breath kind of become even and unhurried. Maybe notice if your feelings even out or settle down a little bit. Notice if your thoughts maybe slow down. In the spleen and the stomach, we celebrate the earth element. This idea of matter and the transformation of matter. And while the spleen and the stomach work so much with these substances from the earth, in traditional Chinese medicine, the spleen is given the task of actually hosting our thinking, that it houses thought. So it's the stuff, the matter that is intimately connected to this world of thinking. That without this beingness, this actual physicality, we wouldn't have the same capacity to think. And with your inhale, roll up. And we're going to go into deer pose. And let's start by taking our right heel behind our right hip. Left heel in front of you. Now, if you are in a more tight body, and that's usually also true if it's like first thing in the morning for you, you tend to be a little bit tighter than you are later in the day. You bring your heels closer to your midline. And if you have more open hips, you always wake up in a dancer body, then you bring your heels a little further away from your midline. And everyone, no matter where you are in this scenario, lift up tall and turn to your left, allowing your right hand to drape around your knee, allowing your left hand to help keep you upright. Make the small adjustments that allow you to really be in this pose, make it your own. And then you found the right place. See how much you can soften into the posture without losing the integrity of the posture, the structure of the posture. With your inhale, feel the height in your spine. And with your exhale, maybe feel just this natural release towards the twist. Or a softening around the joints. So this combination of structure housing this whole world of possibility, thinking. The archetype, the celestial body that is connected to this archetype is Saturn. Now, even as a novice astrologer, you probably have heard of, your first Saturn return. Maybe you're hanging out in crowds where they're starting to maybe talk about the second Saturn return. Or third. But there's this connection to Saturn where when it returns into where it was when you were born, often is a time of change and really like life decisions that give lots of structure to your life. So whether to go into a relationship or leave a relationship or, start a business or leave a business, these kind of themes. Take another full inhale, feel the height of your spine. And with your exhale, unwind a little too much and give a small bow to the right-hand side. And then inhale up, and you're going to stretch your right leg to the back of the mat. And you're going to work forward. You're going to work your left foot forward. And that'll work for you. Your right knee's on the ground. No, your right knee's on the ground. Your right knee is on the ground. Now, see if you can bring your hands to the inside of your left foot. Yay. And if that's okay for you, maybe you can drop down to your elbows. I'll turn it the other way. Maybe you can drop down to your elbows. Maybe you can lie all the way down. Or maybe you can just kind of hang out here. And I'd say jump right in, but don't jump. Go there gently, Stephanie. Great to see your face. So this is dragon pose. It's not one that one would associate with like a gentle passive posture, but see if you can actually balance out kind of the fierceness of the pose with some internal softness. If for some reason your right knee is hurting on the ground like that, you can always tuck your toes under and or lift your knee off the ground. Notice if you're keeping yourself away from the stretch, maybe you can soften a little bit towards it. Comforted by knowing we're not going to stay here for a whole 5 minutes. Allow the rhythm of your breath to help settle you in. And then you're going to either come up onto your hands if you're down on your elbows, or just lift up your head and take your left hand to the outside of your left foot and toe heel your left foot to your right wrist and set up for swan. So this is a series where we don't go straight forward into sleeping swan, but we want to stay lifted here. You may need like if your buttocks is way off the ground, like lifted here, you might put like books or, you know, the animals, obviously, pillows underneath. Now, if you don't have any props around, you can always just bend your back knee. So if I'm way lifted on my left hip and I bend my back knee, then it helps me drop down. So whichever one works for you. And we're going to stay upright here. You want to feel the squeeze into your right kidney space. Can never remember which one it is. And you want to kind of like feel that warming sensation. Maybe feel the uprightness in your chest. And again, this has a lot of fire and a lot of structure to it, but see how you can allow the structure to remain, but soften into it. So I don't know about you, but when I hear like, oh, Saturn return or these Saturn influences, okay, I've been listening to a lot of astrology, so it's really on my mind. But when I hear about Saturn, I've realized that I always kind of have this like, ooh, no, I hate structure. I don't want to I don't like, governments imposing their false ideas and trying to, make me do things in a certain way. I don't like school trying to make me do things in a certain way. All these things that I kind of relate to structure, I notice that I relate in such a negative way to it. And I'm sharing that because I don't think I'm the only one who thinks this way. That often when some other people try to impose structure on us, we're like, no, I'm going to be free. I'm going to decide for myself. And it can be a very kind of fiery meeting. And the challenge then becomes, how do we find these moments in our life when that's being asked of us? How do we figure out a way to kind of lean into it without losing our integrity or without being forced to come into a structure we don't want? How can we where do we actually create structure ourselves that allows these forces to be expressed in our life, but not so they have to be imposed on us? Start to walk your hands forward, coming into sleeping swan. So I'm going to play with this idea a little bit more because it takes a while to kind of appreciate the difference. So I've always kind of played with this idea. I like, freedom everywhere. The easiest way to explain, encapsulate my thinking all at once is, yes, It's anarchy with like a very strong Christian impulse, and it's all about love. And for a lot of people, they just are like, huh? But it's mostly it's because I don't think that most rules should work the same way for everyone. Sounds weird. Let me back up. The matter, at the heart of the matter is that every human being is unique, has this divinely unique set of complexities. And when we only understand structure as being kind of these standardization, these forms being kind of thrusted upon everyone, then it's very easy to see how misguided that can be. Because for one uniquely designed human, one structure will have a certain effect that for another human, they will have a different effect, whether it's the structure of a school day or the chemical structure of a hard drug or the structured kind of gestalt, some gestalt of how you think about the world. So just like industrialized farming has depleted our physical soil of its nutrients, its virility and fertility, it's our standardization of structures that really pulls our humanity out of us instead of creating living forms that could support our humanity with us. So when we get back to looking at the spleen and the stomach, and the role that they play for our physical body to house this complex, unique kind of bundle of physical and non-physical processes. We really discover that often there's no, it doesn't work with the lies. So like there's a level of truth that is in matter, this indisputable, like that's matter, or that's, that's carrot is full of carrotness. And you're probably going, whatever about the carrots, my hip is talking to me. Take 10 more full deep breaths. And after your 10th breath, start to move out of the pose. You can come lying flat on your belly. You can have a sip of coffee. You can, do whatever, quick crossword puzzle, but start to moan and groan. And we're going to come into reclining butterfly or yin fish, depending on what you want to call it, where you bring the bottoms of your feet together and come back onto your elbows, kind of scoot your elbows in together and let your head drop back if it's okay for your neck. If it's not okay for your neck, bring your chin towards your chest. A very nice and open posture. So the spleen, like Saturn, is very much connected to timing and precision and, exactness. It's no surprise that Saturn governs Capricorn. And the good Dr. Rudolf Steiner, he talks about how the spleen, which is one of the few organs that we can actually have removed from our body, and we're totally barely even notice it, but the spleen has this amazing capacity, both in its physicalness and its spiritual role, of allowing us to be kind of sloppy with our timing. That if we didn't have a spleen, we'd have to eat at exactly this time to get the right nutrients to that part of our body, or exactly, take that at this time, and everything would have to be very exact. But because the spleen kind of takes on this Saturnian role in our body, it decides when things are given. And so it doesn't count on you doing the right things at the right time. And Rudolf Steiner talks about how that's why there's proof that there is a spiritual element to our organs, because if there wasn't, and you took out someone's spleen, they obviously shouldn't be able to survive. So you can take out their physical spleen, but you can't take out their spiritual spleen or their invisible spleen, which is not dissimilar from talking about how much the meridians have a play at the same kind of task that the organ does in traditional Chinese medicine. But it's an elegant theorem that it's proof that there obviously is a spiritual spleen, because you can take the physical one out and you still have these qualities that the spleen brings you. Now, let your upper body just drop or slowly drop down to the ground. Take one hand to your heart, one hand to your belly. Feel the warmth underneath your palms. And then, as a way to transition back out of this pose, I want you to bring your hands together, stretch your arms straight out from your heart, right up to the ceiling, lift up your feet. You'll see a magical vagina-like shape. Ooh, and see if you can rebirth yourself. Nice. And then you're gonna stretch your left leg back and maybe wiggle I'm just kidding. You're not stretching it all the way back. You're bringing it behind you, bent. So you have now your right heel in front of you, your left heel behind you. And if you didn't, I'll try to look at the watch and give you a halfway point. So if you want to do the other side too, Stephanie, but we started class here. And inhale, get tall, find the structure of your spine, and then twist to your right, allowing your left arm can help you stay upright here. You also, if you have the flexibility, you can just wind it behind you and tuck your fingers in your inner left thigh or in front of your hip. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. In allopathic, or what we've more grown up with, this traditional Western perspective on how things function, We often connect, of course, eating just with the stomach. And in the stomach is where a lot of this really physical things happen in our digestion, the breaking down of our foods into smaller and smaller structures so they can be integrated into our existing structure. But the spleen's role is actually really taking the absolute purest part of the pure from the food that we eat and then distributing that as nutrients to the rest of our body. We're about the midway point, Steph, if you want to do the other side too. And when we eat a lot of junk food, and by junk, I mean food that has overly processed things in it, chemicals that are very hard for our body to break down, like our stomach, we can quite literally, we can take it in, we aren't sick, we can eat it, we can even enjoy it. It's been known. But these physical kind of structures that are been broken down don't do that much for the spleen. There's not much pure to take back out of the food that is so dead often. So it may appear like, you got a plate full of food or you got a bag full of food and you eat it all, but still the sensation that happens when your stomach is fed, but your spleen is unsatisfied because of the lack of life or pure food in the food that you're eating, is that after you build up, you still feel hungry. You still feel like you're missing something. Take another full inhale, lift up tall. And with your exhale, come back and turn a little bit more and just give a little bow down to the other side. And then we are going to stretch we're going to put our right foot on the ground and stretch our left leg back. Maybe bring your hands in, like to the inside of your right foot and come down into your elbows. Maybe not. So in this variation, different than we're not going into the baby dragon wing. We're just keeping our right knee over our left ankle. It's quite an intense hip opener. And as on the other side, if your back knee is hurting when it's on the ground, you can either tuck your toes under just like that. That might be enough. Or maybe even you come into a more yang version of it and you keep your knee lifted off the ground. We have a moment of gratitude that we're not going to be here for 5 minutes. And then see if, while keeping the structure, you can lovingly soften into it. We notice that when we adopt a very materialistic thinking, this idea of that plate full of food filling you up and not being satisfied, you connect it then more to like, oh, I didn't take enough stuff. But when we start to really understand these nuances in our body, that's not really nuances. When we really understand part of this human freedom that we've been given, that we can eat junk food and for a while survive. Really start to understand that even in our choice of what we put in our mouth, we have a choice of doing what is wise or doing what is foolish. And then inhale, lift up your chest. And now walk your right foot to your left wrist and come into first swan. So you're going to have your chest lifted. You can bend your back knee if you need a little bit to relax into the pose, or you can put some blocks or books underneath your right buttocks. I mean, I never really thought about this before, but it is kind of crazy to think this, yeah? Like as human beings, we've been given so much freedom that we even can eat stuff that isn't real food and seemingly like get away with it. Just like we can lie, we can lie. What else is there? You can lie. But that we have this freedom to err, to miss the mark. And I've always thought of it more as like, in what I say, I have the freedom to withhold the truth, or, I have the freedom to, I always thought of it more as like the social freedoms that we have, but I never really contemplated that being this free as a human being, it also means that we can take in poisons and they don't kill us right away. And that is an incredible level of freedom. However, just like lying, it creates a toxic buildup that ultimately we will be responsible for, and we are responsible for. So just like in the 1950s, the fact that this, we could make so many things out of plastic, and we could put corn syrup into so many products that it was economically really good idea. Just because we could do that, it doesn't mean that this freedom is met without consequence. Every one of our choices is met with consequences. And even this freedom to choose to eat things that aren't feeding the spleen, that don't have nutrients to offer the body, is also something that we see that we will face the consequence of. It's a little bit like this fantasy game. Like you go, okay, y'all, Twinkies are really good for you. Twinkies will satisfy your hunger. You should eat Twinkies. And then if you, like Homer Simpson believing a lie, it's like, yes, I believe you. And you go outside and you eat the Twinkies and you're like, see, I can eat the Twinkies. And it doesn't make it true. Just because someone said that's what they do, and then you said, yes, I believe you, and you went and did it, it doesn't mean that the Twinkies are actually feeding more than just your mouth. So there's this relationship between how we think and what we eat, but how our world manifests. Start to walk your hands forward, pouring your chest down, coming into sleeping swan. Now, we have all grown up in an era where we have what I would even call fraudulent advertisement all around us, to the point where we're actually expected and we're actually held responsible to not believe them. If you said to someone, oh, but I was watching TV late at night and I saw this thing and they said it was the best blah, 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 blah ever. So I bought it and then it broke like 2 days later. They'd be like, duh, nobody believes those, 2 a.m. TV commercials, that we are actually expected to not believe most of what people tell us. Which for me is very similar experience of kind of misusing our capacities as human beings. Allow yourself to soften. Often we notice where structures are impeding us. So even in the structure and form of our hip, in the hip socket, or the structure of our muscles, we will feel it's our limitations rather than where we're strong or feel very held or cared for. Now, we all have such different gifts, and each one of us has kind of our own relationship to structure. And our capacity to create structure. What do we use to set our own boundaries? What structure do we impose on ourselves to keep us in line with what we're committed to? You can think of this like, even this is part of the problem when we believe so many lies, or we're brought up not to believe things. We think that we can take a structure, like an oath, which is basically creating a structure out of our words. I will do no harm. But we can impose these ourselves to give ourselves these kind of guiding forces to help us stay building on something we want to see built. Now, you do remember on the other side, it felt a little too long in pigeon pose. We have to make sure it feels just a little too long in pigeon pose on this side to be really, really balanced. So in a similar way, see if you can allow your tenderness and your gentleness to soften the experience of this structure. And then with your next inhale, start to bring your hands towards you, start to lift up. And first, you're going to roll to your side and stretch both legs out in front of you. And let's just shake them out. Wiggle them around. Take your hands to your lovely, juicy thighs and give yourself a good jiggle. Maybe a loving little knee massage, little calf squeeze. And then to make sure we're very thorough, let's tuck our toes under and come into toes pose. Now in toes pose, we're gonna we're going to give ourselves a little facelift. What? Get out of here. Yeah, I said it. So you're going to sit with your heels on your toes. And this, I mean, it's partly distract pose, but so this is a face yoga pose. Now you remember, you know, you decide how much pain is okay for you. Choose your own safe word. All right. And you're going to take your hands to the outside of your eye, and you're just going to pull a little bit. And you want to keep your forehead relaxed. Hopefully you can see you can feel it with your other hand. And then you're going to pull your head to the side that you're going to. And then imagine that you're going to let your tongue drop to the ground, but it has to be kind of like active. Very nice. Now we better do the other side before our toes fall off. You might have to do a little. Now take your whatever arm you're doing, just pull gently. You're not going to be like, you're not stretching your eye to your ear, just pulling it taut, and then letting your ear come down to your shoulder, and then dropping your tongue to the floor. I mean, it's crazy. When I put my tongue out, I can really feel it even further down in my body. I don't know how it works for y'all. And then come back up, wipe your chin, bring your hands forward, slap out your feet, and then rock back and stretch your feet. And then you're gonna slide onto your left-hand side. And we're coming into pulling the cat's tail, which first starts as sexy pinup yogi girl, yay, and then stretch your top leg straight out. So I'm starting with my right leg coming straight out from my hip. And I usually like to have it low, like that's where my go-to is. But for this pose, you really want to let it come straight out of your hip. Awesome. And then you're going to reach back and you're going to hold on to your left foot, and you're going to pull your foot to your buttocks with your right hand. Now, this might be plenty for you. Or if you feel like you have a little bit of openness, you're going to let both of your shoulders drop down to the ground. And then you might have to encourage your right leg to go up a little bit. And it's also perfectly fine to, you know, stay just kind of in the place where you're propping your head up with your hand and your elbow. Take a full inhale with your exhale, just sigh it out. So when we actually bring structure into our own lives, into our own day, it has a very different effect than when it's being imposed on us. For instance, we can even bring a little structure to our breathing. We can slow our breath down. We can let it be deeper. And then our experience can be a calming effect. We can, of course, choose to go the other way too. We can on purpose force our breath to go faster and hyperventilate nearly, and actually elevate our heart rate and kind of lift up something. We'll notice that we can give structure to our sleep, that we go to bed between, 9:30 and 10 every night, and we wake up every day around 6. This kind of rhythm, this structure can actually empower your body. That clarity, it can be a grounding effect, but, liberate your energy. And we may even notice how relevant and intimately structure is connected to beauty and virtue. So we can talk about having, even just like the structure of a church or a temple or a beautiful home. We can find that if we have the right balance in a structure, it's evocative for us. We feel it. Or when that structure is missing, we feel that too. So when the structure of our truth is missing, another human being will feel that. If we are missing our own capacity to think, to provide our own kind of structure of the world, then there's room for others to impose that on you. Now start to roll back to center. Or you can even roll onto your back and go the other way. There's many ways to get to Mecca. And we come back to the beach. Stretch your top leg forward. Maybe lift it a little higher than you want to. Reach back and hold on to your left foot, pulling your heel to your buttocks. And if it's there for you, feel free to drop your shoulders down to the ground. So when we are disciplined enough to, for instance, buy foods that don't have things put into the food so it stays good looking on the shelf. When we are disciplined enough to, choose the biodynamic, choose the local, choose the organic, then this food that we take into our body will have more life, will have more to provide, not only the bulk craving element of our stomach, but also this nutritional value, the essence, the pure that our spleen so needs to create the structures in our body that can house this incredible capacity to think. And when we are taking care in that way to provide for our physical existence, not only is it physically good for us, but it's also physically good for the body of the earth, for our neighbors, for the animals, for all the beings. But it also gives you the optimal environment to be the most free that you can be in your thinking. There's a lot of confusion going on between freedom, privilege, rights. And I feel, and this confusion is being exploited. So people are choosing this privilege of air travel, could one say, as an example, over the freedom of your cells in your body. They're like, oh, I don't really believe in it, but I'll do it anyways because I really want to be free to go over there and go over there and do that. And this autonomy in our physical body, it is something that you can give away. We are this free. But there is an exchange. And then, especially if we start to look at, what are the consequences for the physical body? What are the consequences for this body of the earth? For all living beings? Well, if Lael's done, we're probably all done. Start to take probably, let's say, 5 full breaths, moving around, wiggling around a little bit if you want, moaning and groaning a little bit. Sometimes it would be really convenient to lie about things. Who hasn't, fantasized about a fake vax pass? No, just kidding. Yeah. But again, there are consequences. If you're not out of the pose, find your way out of the pose. And then we're all going to come onto our back and we're just going to do a short little happy baby. So lying on your back, you're going to bring your feet over your knees and grab onto the inside of your feet. If you're very tense and you can't really grab your feet, you can also grab the back of your thighs. And then with your spine unrolling onto the mat, pull your feet down with your hands so that your knees come into your armpits. So happy baby, if you want it, exists. We want to use our freedoms to create the structures that we actually want to kind of host and house and facilitate our beingness, our becoming, which is part of what you're doing by doing yoga. So thank you for that. Now squeeze your knees together. Lift up your face and kiss your knees. Thank you. An incredible feat, our knees. That's amazing. They last as long as they do. Crazy structure. And then stretch your legs long. Take your arms next to your body, palms facing up. Especially, make sure you're warm. And come into Savasana, allowing your body to relax and be still, but allowing just enough discipline in your thinking to keep your attention in your body and in the room, in the present moment. With your next inhale, invite your breath to the edges of your body. Maybe wiggle your fingers and your toes. Stretch your whole body long. With your exhale, curl into a ball and roll onto your side or into plow pose. You go, girl. And then help yourself up into a comfortable seated position. Allow your hands to meet at heart center. Feel the ground below you, lift up tall above, and then close your eyes. And just for a moment, I just want to acknowledge, I really love this, that we're in the same moment, but one of you is in New Hampshire, one of you is in California, two of you in Basel, and I believe the Herald's bag, one of you in England, and I'm here in Sweden. So come close your eyes and be in the same moment together. Empty your breath. Take a deep inhale. Bring your prayer hands to your third eye. Invite the divine light. And as we bow forward together, we say, Namaste. And so much love. Woo! Yeah. Go out there and make great choices. Thank you.